My name is Morgan Evans. I'm a technical specialist for Autodesk. I'm going to be covering the latest features in Maya today. A little bit about me. So I've worked in the industry as a rigger for the last 12 years. These are some of the companies I've worked at throughout my career. My last gig was at Passion Pictures as a rigging soup. So I bring to the role a lot of production experience. I've been with Autodesk since February this year. So predominantly Maya, I cover a bit of Shotgun as well, and also Stingray. So I'm not going to bombard you with a load of sort of features on various slides. So the agenda today is Maya. And I'm going to start off with a few videos to begin with, and then I'm going to jump into Maya Live to show you some of the other new features that we've had over the course of this year. So April, we saw the edition of Maya 2016 Extension 2, which had a lot of new tools, particularly on the character side of things. Maya 2017 came out in line with SIGGRAPH, and we saw yet another big bout of new features. So the amount of content that we're dishing out now with these releases is just getting bigger and bigger each time we see a new version of Maya. So a big bit of news for us this year was the introduction of Arnold into Maya 2017 as your standard renderer. So the big advantage of Arnold is the power of the render view in particular. So there's this real-time link, so that as you're panning around in the viewport, you're seeing an instant update in the Arnold render view. So obviously it's dithered and a sort of basic representation of what the final render is going to look like, but really Arnold is all about speed and efficiency. And with Arnold as well, we have a lot of Arnold hypershade support, so a lot of shaders to talk to other products like Bifrost with the particle side of things. So this is a big news for us. So with 2017, you get your standalone license for Arnold. If you're interested in batch rendering for Arnold, that's still kind of business as normal, so the licensing is through Solid Angle for any network rendering, but you get to try out all the features, particularly good for doing donuts and that sort of thing. But this is big news for us in Maya 2017. The viewport has also seen big improvements as well. So we've got this age-old problem here of trying to view displacement maps. You might end up with a character intersecting through the ground. We can now view those displacement maps in the OpenGL viewport. So no longer are you having to create proxy geometry to represent what those ground planes are going to look like. You get the out-of-the-box displacement visible now in the viewport, which will give you a much closer representation, whether it's for environment work or character work as well, where you want to get all that level of detail on wrinkly monsters and that sort of thing. We can get this level of detail in the viewport now. So this is another big step forward in what we can do with Maya. We've seen a lot of updates to the UI elements of Maya as well, particularly in 2017. So Workspaces is a new addition to 2017. This is the ability to dock windows wherever you want in the viewport panel. You can save your layouts now. And with that, you also save out any viewport presets. So an animator, for example, you want to have everything running fast, so you're going to turn off all the things like viewport ambient occlusion and that sort of thing to keep performance high. And you put all your graph editor and things like that on the preset. That all gets saved under the one workspace. So it's a combination of viewport settings and UI elements. The other benefit to the new workspaces is that you can dock any window to any window with floating workspaces. And just coming up in a second in this video, we'll see how you're able to really mix and match which panels sit together. So whether it's an outline and a hypershade, that sort of thing, it gives you a huge amount of control over setting up your viewport. So particularly if you have the luxury of two monitors, this sort of example that we're seeing here is going to be a real benefit to you. So you're going to be able to set up these custom workspaces and save them out as presets. And you can see here you've got a massive amount of control over what you want to see in terms of your tool set that you use on a day-to-day basis. So just general workflow stuff. This should make your day-to-day usage of Maya much more efficient. So a big feature we've seen in Maya 2017 is the introduction of our time editor. So this is a clip-based way of dealing with your animation. So here we're just dragging in some FBXs in this case. You can also drag in Maya scene files. And this will apply some animation to a character. Now what's particularly useful about the way that we deal with these animation clips is that you're able to mix and match and blend clips very, very quickly and easily. So particularly in dealing with motion capture editing, you might have gone into other packages like Motion Builder to do this in the past. You can do this in Maya now. So when we see the blends here, when we chop up clips and do the retiming, it's very easy to treat this like you would, say, a film clip in something like a simple film editing package. You can treat animation in the same way. So we can see here we've got this automatic loop function here where we're just looping that firing of the gun, and then it automatically blends them with the next part of that clip that we kind of shifted along in the timeline. So you can group different clips. So once you've chopped it up a little bit and you want to perhaps treat that as a singular clip, you can group them so you can scale it up and down. And then you can mix the clips very easily as well in terms of blending between different bits of animation. So you've got a huge amount of control. So if you've got a library of animation that you'd like to reuse, this is a very useful tool for you to be able to manage that data. So the other thing that's very powerful in the new time editor is the way it matches the clips together. So the clips don't even necessarily have to have the same start and end pose. It has a very clever way of interpolating between the previous clip and the second clip that we've got here, so that you can essentially relocate the clips to match the start and end pose together. So if you have one character walking in one direction, you've got another clip where it's walking in a different direction, it can match the trajectory just based on a common rig and a common route hierarchy. So it gives you a huge amount of control over how you blend these clips together. So another big part to Maya 2017, we've seen big leaps forward in the way we do our grooms in XGen. So now you don't have to do that traditional way of dealing with your hair grooms in terms of using guide splines to do your hair grooms. You can now actually do this directly on your preview hairs using all of Maya's modeling tools. So we've got our generic hipster character here. It just gives you that ability to go in, paint where you want the hairs to be. You can see here with speed in the viewport as well, we're able to just go in and really work into these grooms very quickly and easily. So here we're just sort of affecting the profile of the different preview hairs. And you can work in groups as well. So if you want to toggle the different effects that you've applied to that on and off, whether it's your clumps and noise that you're putting through the hair, it's very easy to do. And here you can see you've got the nice fall off as well. So all the modeling and sculpting tools that you're used to using in Maya, you can use all of these tools on your hair grooms as well. Here we're seeing a bit of templating going on, so you can actually freeze portions of the hair that you're happy with. This applies to our modeling as well in Maya. So if you want to lock down a bit of hair so that you're not accidentally painting it when you didn't mean to, you can create this temporary template to sort of freeze out parts of the hair that you're happy and you want to leave that part alone and you want to carry on working. So the other part to setting up your grooms in XGen, we can actually use simulations to help kind of settle the hairs down. So we'll see here if you want to use gravity and other forces to essentially give you a starting point for setting up your grooms, we can do this as well. And then you can toggle this on and off with a slider, so you don't have to wait for the end result. So you can really have a very flexible way of working, whether it's the artistic approach, you're using all the sculpt tools, or you want to use real world physics to help you achieve these kind of results. So Bifrost is our simulation system that has had a lot of tweaks over the last couple of releases. This is our ocean simulation system, so we're actually deforming geometry here. I'll be doing a full session on this afternoon, which will be a combination of motion graphics and effects. So we'll be talking a little bit more about how you can generate this kind of content. But this kind of stuff, although it looks incredibly complex, is actually very easy to set up now using Bifrost. And just to give you a taste of what I'll be talking about this afternoon, we've got something called motion fields now, which was new to Maya 2017. And this is the ability to essentially art direct your simulations very, very easily through a system of presets. So we're seeing here we've just got a couple of these motion fields in action. And again, it looks like it's incredibly complicated results that you were getting, but you can achieve this stuff pretty much out of the box. So here, all we're doing is simply animating that motion field through the volume of fluid, and that's the kind of results that we're getting. There's no sort of weeks of tweaking settings here to achieve these kind of results. So I'll be going into this in more detail this afternoon, so if people are here for my next session, I'll be covering this stuff in a lot more detail for Bifrost, but just for a taster, I thought it'd be nice to show this morning. So motion graphics is another part of Maya that has had the luxury of a lot of input over the last couple of releases. So we inherited a tool called Mesh. I'm just going to pause this video while I introduce it. This was by a company called Mainframe. They're based here in London and in Manchester. And this example here, although it's not traditional motion graphics, this is the sort of quantity of instancing that you can deal with using their tools. So I think there's up to 400 billion polys or something like that in this, no, 4 billion polys, sorry, in this example here. And this is using the power of Mesh to generate all of these instances and build your environment. So I'm just going to quickly go back to the beginning of that video. So what's nice about Mesh is it's got a very nice user interface for generating this kind of content. So yes, it was originally conceptualized for traditional animation. This is modeling chainmail, for example, using instances. And you've just got a huge amount of control over how this stuff is set up. So I'll be going again into this in more detail this afternoon. But it's got a very nice UI, simple to use, and you can create, basic simulation effects, basic dynamics very quickly and easily using this tool. And there's no caching involved here. You can do this all in the viewport in real time with very large numbers of instances. And I'll be doing a small taster of this live in a second, but going into more detail this afternoon. So what's nice about Mesh as a tool is you can actually take the output of this motion graphics network and use it to drive anything in Maya. So here we're taking some audio from an MP3 file, and we're using it to drive an extrude operator on this cube. So you've got a huge amount of control over the sorts of things that you can do using Mesh, and it's just one of those tools that, although traditionally conceptualized for motion graphics, you can do all sorts of interesting effects with it that go way beyond just basic motion graphics. So I'm going to switch over now to show you a few bits and bobs live in Maya. And as I said, this afternoon I'll be going over some of the effects and motion graphics stuff in more detail. So I've got a couple of Mayas open here already. There we go. So before I sort of go into some of these more interesting features, particularly the character side of things, this is the new content browser in Maya. It's worth knowing about. It's just a nice visual way of being able to go through all of your files on disk. So for instance, here you get your basic thumbnails. You can have animated thumbnails now. So this is a very easy feature to set up. It's just a little tick box. When you save a file in Maya now, you can save a little animated thumbnail, and it just saves some metadata with your scene file. A particularly good use for this is perhaps a motion capture library, for example, where dance1.ma, it's not very descriptive, but you just hover the mouse over it, and then you can go through these, and you've got your basic animated thumbnails there to help you establish, what that scene file name actually corresponds to. So you get some basic metadata as well, when the file was saved, the file size, that sort of thing. In terms of a learning resource, there's an examples tab as well, which is quite good. So if you want to look at some of these Bifrost examples, you can access this stuff. So this all comes with Maya out of the box. And some basic models, if you want to use them as a starting point. So it's just a good tool to know about, particularly from a learning resource. You can have a favorites tab as well. So say I want to make this fish one of my favorites, I just select it, hit the star here, and you can see it's added it to the favorites panel here on the side. So in terms of just general file management, it's useful to know about this. So if you're working on a project and you've got 4 files that you're just opening constantly at the same point in time, you can add these to your favorites and you can remove them when you're done. So it's just a quick way to help you manage your files. So in terms of bringing the files into your scenes, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can just right click, you can bring it in as a reference model, or you can just drag and drop in here, or you can just hit the import button. So I've actually already brought him into the scene. So I'm going to shut this down now. So I'm going to show you some of the character tool sets now that we've seen come out over the course of this year. So I'm just going to switch cameras so we can see our pilot. Oops, not sure what's happened to his face. It's gone very dark there. So I'm going to start off with the quick rig tool. I think we've got a bit of feedback going on here. Okay, so we're going to go to the rigging tools. So you can get to the quick rig tool under the animation editors or the rigging shelf. So if we look at the outliner, all we need to do here with this character is we just start off by selecting the meshes that make up this character. And we can hit this auto rig button. So what this is doing in the background, this is going to analyze the mesh, figure out where to put the pivot points, and it's going to skin him for us at the same time with a human IK compatible rig. So you can see it just takes a couple of seconds to figure that stuff out for us. So if we pull this guy around now, we can see it's rigged him up already, and if I go to the human IK panel here and switch this to this mode, we can see it's done a very good job of rigging up this character. This is using our geodesic voxel binding algorithm with the skinning, so this is our favored algorithm now for getting the best results as your initial bind. So there's been no preset skin weights here, there's no smoke and mirrors, that is just the initial bind that you're getting from your character. So geodesic voxel binding is particularly good for things like fingers, where you get that traditional problem where it can't figure out which joints to bind to which vertices. So geodesic voxel binding is very powerful at giving a very good initial resolve. So this is motion capture compatible. So if we go back to our content browser now, I'm going to bring in a little bit of mocap. Just drag that into the scene. Just going to hide the character that I just brought in. And now that I brought that motion capture into the scene, if we go back to the human IK panel, make this a bit smaller. That dance will be showing up there as our motion capture example. So if we just change cameras here so we can see it. It is. So we've gone from a mesh to a rig to a piece of animation in just a couple of seconds there. So, this is a very good tool to know about. At this point in time, I wouldn't say it's a complete replacement for a production rigging system. It is very much aimed at the human IK motion capture side of things. But where it's useful is, say you want to get director approval, where often, the director says, I don't want to see that character in a T-pose, I want to see him holding a rifle, or, there's some brief from the director whilst it's in the modeling phase. You could put this tool in the hands of a modeler, they could quickly rig it up, put it into a quick pose, and they could carry on sculpting in it on their sculpting tool of choice. And it's these kind of uses where I think it's a particularly useful tool. I could have really done with this tool when I was working as a rigger. We did a lot of motion capture projects, a lot of VR projects as well. And just getting it into human IK that quickly would have just been a godsend at the time. So it's a very useful tool to know about. And although it works best with bipedal characters, so if they're in their T-pose and things like that, that's where you're going to get your best results. It does work with other characters as well. So if we go back to our content browser, which I think is still open here, I'm going to bring in something a bit more challenging. We're going to see how we get on. So let's give this raptor a go. So I'm just going to pan out here so we can see it. So if I run the quick rig tool on this now, we're going to see that you get a pretty good resolve straight out of the box. So I'm going to hit the auto rig button. So obviously it's not going to figure out that he's got a tail because it's still using a human rig there. But you can see it's done a pretty good job of figuring out where to put those points. It struggled a little bit with the elbow. but it's done a pretty decent job there bringing up the dinosaur as well. So I'm not too concerned that it hasn't quite got the elbow exactly where I want. I can go into a step-by-step mode here as well, which does let me go and refine this slightly. So if I want to go back and tweak the guide slightly, I can just hit this update button. So what this does is it blows away the skeleton, it blows away the skin weights, and takes you back to a point where you're just dealing with pivot joints. So we now have the ability to mirror UV textures very easily. So this is just simply our mirror tool here in the UV editor. So we select the midpoint here, and then we can go ahead and we can start painting these UVs very quickly and easily. If we hold down the control key, we can simply pop those UVs. And this has been a very popular new feature with a lot of texture artists that we've shown this to when we've been visiting customers. So you can mirror it in either direction. So if I hit the control key here, it's going to do it on either side. So yeah, it's a really useful new feature to the UV editor. So as well as simple mirroring, we've also got new layout improvements as well to the UV editor. So if I select these items here, and we go to the layout settings, we have a lot of control here about how these objects are laid out inside our UV editor. So you can say, how many tiles, for instance, you want it to span, or whether you want to be vertical or horizontal. So I just apply this here. They're all vertical at the moment, and the reason they're all in the top half is because it's just set to the top half here. If I want it to be the full square, I can set it to be the full square. So I've got two objects selected here. Say I want these ones to be in the top half of the square. I can do that, and the other object, perhaps I want them to be in the bottom half. I can do that as well. So you've got a lot of control over how these objects are laid out. You can also adjust the shell padding as well, so perhaps you want to have a little bit of spacing between the shells in the UV editor. We can do this as well. So you've got a lot of control over how the shells are laid out, and this is only going to get better as well over the coming releases of Maya. So we've got some stuff being tested internally right now that is just going to take this all to the next level as well. So finally, the other improvement that we've seen to the UV editor is the ability to texture up fairly complex objects very quickly and easily. So we've got this tree here. We're going to just go in and give it a planar UV, and that's going to be our starting point. So this is our starting point here. We're going to run an auto seams on this. I'm going to start off with a fairly small shell splitting tolerance value of 0.2. I'm going to apply that, and I'm going to unfold the mesh. So this is our starting point for unwrapping this tree. And then I'm going to go run the auto seams a second time, but this time with double the shell splitting value to create basically double the number of splits at 0.4. And then I'm going to unfold it a second time. And if we turn on the checker here, we can see it's done a pretty decent job there of texturing up that tree very quickly and easily. So it's these kind of improvements to just general workflow stuff that we're looking to do. If you want to go in and then tweak the shells some more, we've got this slicing tool as well. So you can just go in and you can chop that stuff up. I obviously still haven't laid these out yet. But it's these kind of improvements, just basic workflow stuff, I think is going to make everybody's lives a lot easier when dealing with day-to-day tasks within Maya. So I thought it would be fun to show some of the MASH stuff very briefly. I will be covering it in more detail this afternoon, but I've got a very quick demo that's nice to show in terms of what you can do with the MASH toolset. So I'm just quickly going to restart Maya here. Any questions so far while I'm just waiting for this to load? No? Good. Okay, so I've got an example scene here I'm going to load up for MASH, and then I'm going to go in and show you a little bit of about what mesh is and how it works. So I've got a couple of items in the scene already. I've got this little sliver of cube down here that I'd like to use as my starting point for our mesh network. So mesh lives on the animation shelf or also on the effects shelf because it sort of bridges both departments, if you like. So we would create our mesh network here. So under the hood, this is using my instances, but there's a couple of modes that we can do this in here. It's either an instancer or it's a mesh. So if it's a mesh, there's a big advantage there because obviously you can cache the meshes out as a Limbix and you can get it into your other packages as well. So we're going to set up a few instances here in mesh mode, and we'll see if we look down here, it's created 10 instances of these cubes. So this is our kind of starting point, nothing too exciting yet, but hopefully this will start to get more interesting very quickly. So you've got a few different modes here to how you deal with these instances. So at the heart of your mesh network, you have the distribute node. So this is kind of what determines how many instances you have. So say I want to wrap this up to a slightly more interesting number, say 1500. Obviously it's bunched them all up here because it's still in linear mode, but if I switch it to something like radial and go to the radial settings, there's a load of additional changes that we can do to these instances. So all these sliders that you see me pulling around, they're all animatable and they're all keyable. So I'm just playing with the Z offset there of that rotation value. Perhaps I want to increase the angle. And so all of this stuff is animatable. And all we're seeing here is just a ton of these cubes. I've got 1,500 of these cubes all bunched up together. So this is just in radial mode. But for this example, I want to use this mesh as a placeholder for all those instances. So if I go to mesh mode, I open up my outliner, I can select this sphere. And if I go down to the mesh settings within the mesh distribute node, I can middle click and drag this sphere over as a input object. Oops, let's break this connection. So we drag this over as an input object, and then all those cubes will then stick to the mesh. So we can continue to ramp this number up a bit. I'm going to put this up to, say, 5,000 instances. So we're in scatter mode at the moment, so if I dial this number up and down, you see it's all quite random. You can change this to be by vertex order if you want to, so this can all be very clean cut. So all of these effects are animatable. You can see the performance is very high there. You know, we've got 5,000 instances, it's not slowing down. So I'm just going to hide that sphere. Then if we go back to our main mesh panel, we can see here that we've got all these different behaviors that we can apply to this mesh network. So I'm going to actually go in and apply a visibility node. So what we can do here is we can either go in and start painting the effects of these instances and where they sit on that sphere, or we can load a predetermined texture. So I've got a texture here. I'm going to go in and load this up. Just called this world specular. And to get the UVs correct, if I go back to my mesh network and visibility, currently it's just a Y projection, but if I middle click and drag the sphere over as a map helper, it's going to match the orientation of that UV. So we've got something that looks a little bit like a map of the world. If we want to add a basic transform to this, we can go in and we can add, say, a transform node to this. And I've got a locator in the scene with some basic animation on it already. So I can drag this over here to this controller null input. And then if I hit play, then we've got, you know, a little sort of spinning globe effect there. So that's just kind of the basics of mesh. And then if I wanted to add some more interesting effects here, I've got this signal node. So this will add a basic kind of noise to that, bit of jitter. And again, you can see the performance is very high. It's not slowing up at all. And if I go back to the distribute node, I'm just going to switch this from vertex to random vertex because I want to have a slightly more interesting order to this. And if we go back to our signal node, there's other settings as well. So that's just 4D noise at the moment. You can have more of a Brownian motion to it. So this isn't deforming the geometry of the sphere. This is actually deforming the transforms of those instances. So you've got a lot of basic effects in there, which I'll be covering later in the motion graphics session. The other thing you can do is have audio as a driver, which is always quite fun. So I can add an audio node here. I'm going to ramp up its effect on the scale of these, boost the strength a bit. So with the audio node, if you think of a graphic equalizer, for instance, it's about driving channels. So we've got a number of bands being driven here. It's currently 64. We're going to ramp this up to, say, 500. I'm going to load in a audio file here. And if I load in the same audio file to my timeline, and hopefully we'll get some sound, depending on whether it's connected to the speakers. So you can see we've got this kind of graphic equalizer effect there. You know, this kind of stuff historically in Maya would have required scripting, custom plugins. And you know, I've just been tinkering around there in Mesh for just a couple of minutes. And what is nice about Mesh is it's a very user-friendly tool. As you saw here from this panel, it's all very visual icons. It was designed by a motion graphics company. So Mainframe are a motion graphics company. They're still very much at the forefront of its development. So we license the tech off them at Autodesk. And we work with them to, you know, keep this nice intuitive workflow. So that's what I particularly like about this tool is it's been designed by an artist, so it's very easy to pick up. Definitely have a play around with it. I think it's one of the best new features to have come to Maya in the last couple of releases. So it's definitely worth having a look at. So on the character side of things, I've probably got about another 10 minutes left. I just want to go in and show some of the other new features that we've got. So I am going to have to use the Quick Rig tool again for this one, so I hope it's not going to let me down. So it's just loading, he's got a few textures on him. Here you go, so here he is again. So part of the character workflow that we've added to Maya over the last couple of releases, we can now, there's definitely some shading issues today, just hide that. So we can now add post-face deformation shapes very quickly and easily to our characters. So if you need to do a corrective sculpt, you can do this very quickly now with the new workflow. So if I want to go in and rotate this up here, we see we've got a little bit of a bulge down the side of the chest. I want to go in and fix that quickly and easily. So if I go to the modeling tools here on the pose or to the animation editor and go to the new pose editor, what this is doing is this is basically taking the rotation of a joint and using it to drive a corrective shape. Historically in Maya, you probably would have again had to have either reverse engineered this or have your rigger write some custom stuff for this, or perhaps use a third-party plugin. So this kind of takes care of all of this for you. So we create our pose interpolator. This takes the rotation of that joint. We put it into our problem pose. We select the mesh, and then we add new pose. So what this is doing in the background, it's setting up a new blend shape for us. And there's a couple of new deformation orders that we can choose from. So we've now got one in Maya called post deformation. So what the big advantage to this is in Maya is you can do these corrective sculpts directly on a deformed mesh. You don't need to do any of this reverse engineering where you're trying to figure out the deltas or you know, get it looking correct at the origin. You can have it posed, it can be off the origin, you can do your sculpts now, and it's just purely working in that local vertex space. So we're going to create this pose shape here. Oops. Try one more time. There you go. So what is new about Maya is this edit mode here. So if edit mode is on, it's like it's switching you to a local vertex mode. So you can do your tweaks on your mesh. You're not actually affecting the default topology of the model. You're just working in a local delta space for vertices. So if we leave it on edit mode here, I'm just going to go in and do a very quick sculpt to this character. So we can load in the modeling toolkit here, so we can have some basic sculpt tools if we want to. And also, you can just get to it through the traditional means. If you want to go in and just paint your sculpts, you can do it that way as well. So I'm just going to scale this brush up and use the grab tool here to sort of smooth this out a bit. So it's doing a bit of a sculpt there. So if we want to just, affect what's going on under there, modeling's not my forte, but it's just to sort of get across. We're doing a bit of a sculpt there. We can toggle these changes on and off. So you can see we're just trying to sort of even up the volume there a little bit. If we then take this out of edit mode and I go back to the rotation, we can see it's already driving that fix for us, so it's dialing that shape on and off. So we can see this value here is going from 0 to 1, and that's just driving the blend shape. So under the hood, this is a standard blend shape. Sorry, I'm getting some mega feedback here. So yeah, under the hood, this is a standard blend shape. So if we go and look at the actual blend shape that we created, what this is doing, it's just creating a connection to that interpolator node. So you can have multiple interpolators if you want to. You could have one for when the arm is raised up, one for when the arm is raised down. And if we look at the advanced options here, it allows you to do this Gaussian fall off. So you could go in and you can choose how it's blending between those different sculpts. So again, just basic kind of character workflow stuff. It's good to know about this tool, and it will really speed up your workflow. So I'm going to look at the blend shape editor just to finish off here. So we've got the head hiding here somewhere. Okay, I'm not sure why it's gone interesting with the shading. It's really playing up with me today. I blame the graphics card. Okay, I'm just loading this in again. Okay, so that looks a bit more healthy. So yeah, just to finish off, I'm going to show you the new blend shape editor. So this again lives under the animation editor. So what is new about this tool is, again, in the same way that we saw it with the pose editor, you can go in and you can create your edits very quickly and easily by working in this sort of local vertex space. So if we add a new target here, I'm going to perhaps call this, say, L Mad Brow. And I'm just going to switch to the modeling tools. And I want to go in and start just doing a bit of sculpting on that character. So a good tool for this would probably be, let's see. Yeah, I think I'm just going to pull the sculpts down. So if we want to do a sort of basic grabbing and verts and do the soft fall off here, and scale that down. So I'm in symmetry mode at the moment. I don't want to have this on. I'm just going to turn this off. Oh dear. And which speaker it is? I'm leaning too near. So I'm just going to go in and start doing a bit of sculpting there on this character. So we're going to give him a bit of a mad brow look there. And just for an example here, if I increase the fall off, say I'm pulling around this lid here, and you can see it's affecting the eyelid with the eyebrow. Perhaps I don't actually want it to affect the eyelid. If we're in edit mode, there's actually an erase tool now. So it's just basic workflow stuff, but I think it's going to make that process of going from model to rig much, much easier. And again, with this edit mode, So say you've already rigged up this character, you don't necessarily have the time to go all the way back through to modeling, re-bring in all those 50 heads for your lens shapes. You can do that just by hitting this edit button now. So even if this character has a rig in it, and you just want to go in and just make a very minor tweak, you could give that rigging file back to the modeler, or perhaps if the rigger is handy in modeling department as well, he can just hit that edit button and do those tweaks very quickly and easily. So a really good tool to know about, and will definitely improve character workflows. So I think that's kind of me out of time for today. Happy to answer any questions quickly. I think we've got about 15 minutes before the next session. So yeah, I hope it's been beneficial. I apologize for the technical difficulties today, but I hope it's got the message across over all the new features that we've had in Maya over the last couple of releases.